Questions and doubts are a common and necessary part of every journey. They help find the best answers to life's hard questions and to challenge long-held beliefs that might not actually be true or proven or healthy. They can keep us from harm or help us to escape bad situations. Sometimes our questions and doubts can set us free, but they aren't easy. And these trying times can make us feel even more disconnected, desperate, and alone. But you are not alone. Recovering from Religion is an organization comprised of people just like you. People who have asked questions, who understand doubt, who can help you navigate through the confusion, and who are genuinely there to help. 24 hours a day, any day, you can reach out for encouragement and support on the telephone or via online chat. And RfR even provides online communities to connect with others just like you, even if you choose to do so anonymously. Recovering from Religion is a safe place where you can reach out, explore your questions, converse with a friend, and be completely yourself without fear. No judgment, no rejection, just an opportunity to connect with someone who understands. There's no reason to go it alone. Recovering from Religion is ready whenever you are. Reach out today at recoveringfromreligion.org.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Another week with RfRx. I am your host, Amaia Perez. I'm the online programming director, and I'm here with Eric Wells, who is the support group director. So how are you, Eric? How are you today? How's your week been?
I'm doing great. I'm pretty excited about this. I've got a busy week coming up, but I definitely set some time aside to be here as the host. I'm really excited to talk to Mr. Becker. In fact, I'm a little bit of a fanboying here because I just love what he does.
Yeah, me too. This is a question that I have had with my partner, how to raise kids and how to make sure that they are curious when they're growing up. So it's definitely going to be very relevant for both secular and religious and ex-religious people. So super excited for this one. So I'm going to start by speaking a bit about what is RfR. What is RfRx, actually, not RfR. So RfRx is a series of online weekly sessions in which we bring in guests to discuss different topics that are relevant to anyone who is involved in RfR. So they're usually related to living religion, but it's also about, autonomy, how to raise kids, so all sorts of different topics. This is not a replacement for the helpline community or the support groups. It's more of a complement to these services. And it's also a great way of providing good advice and coping skills to anyone who needs them right now. So if you have any questions that you would like to send us or any sort of feedback to tell us how terrible we're doing our work, all you have to do is send us an email to rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. And if you want to watch any of our previous RfRx videos, all you have to do is go to our YouTube channel. And I see that, Eric, you have pulled up the poll. So just as a friendly reminder, this is anonymous, so don't worry about us judging you. Make sure you take part, make sure the engagement is up. So yeah. And now let's jump to what is our mission statement. So our mission statement is that we offer hope, healing, and support to anyone who is struggling with issues of religion and non-belief. So Eric, do you want to start by explaining hope?
You bet I do. So hope, the way that RfR approaches providing hope for folks who are having doubts or losing their religion or leaving their religion behind is we have stories. All of us have got stories about how we left religion and came out on the other side, or we struggled with our doubts. And so those stories are presented through our blog and through our podcast. So be sure to take a look at the links in the chat and see if you can subscribe to the blog and the podcast, because they have got some very, very powerful stories that are both heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, but also offer that hope and light at the end of the tunnel for folks who are doubting. What about healing, Amaia? How does RfR provide healing for folks?
So healing comes from our helpline, and this is done via online chat or telephone call. And here our trained agents will listen to you with an empathetic ear and no judgment or criticism to any issue that you may have, which is related to religion or loss of faith. This is a completely confidential, available 24/7 and safe resource. So I highly recommend you use it if you're in need of this. And apart from this helpline online chat phone call thing, we also have a very, very large number of resources. We have collected all sorts of books, articles, videos, podcasts, just anything you can imagine, you will find it there. So if you ever want to check it out, all you have to do is go to recoveringfromreligion.org/resources, which I think Todd, if he hasn't already put it in the chat, he will. And if you're watching this on YouTube, it will be in the description box. Am I forgetting anything? No, so now support group. Eric, do you want to start with support since you are the director and the expert?
Yes, I do. I say this every week, but where my heart really lies is with the support groups, the peer support. Recovering from religion, we're not out here to deconvert folks. We're really here to meet them where they're at. There is a lot of pain and a lot of suffering and a lot of doubt and questions in this world. And our job is, as volunteers, is to just meet them where they're at and be empathetic and listen to what they have to say. And point them into directions where some great resources that may help them could be. So the support groups is just that. We meet in person once a month or so, and right now we're obviously meeting over Zoom, but we have 52 support groups across the world. It's a huge number of support groups that we've got, and hundreds of people every year are coming through and sitting down with us, and we as support group leaders are creating a safe space in which to express your doubts and concerns. And if you feel safe enough to even go through some of the trauma and work through it, I've seen some amazing things happen for people. They walk in feeling scared and confused, and they walk out feeling stronger than ever. So you can find the nearest support group near you at the Recovering from Religion website, but there's also a link in the chat. In addition to that, we provide support through the Secular Therapy Project. Oftentimes, more than peer support is needed to kind of address some of the concerns that are going on. And that's where we need professional help. And it can be a little risky looking around for professional help when especially if you live in a conservative area, because folks may run the risk of a therapist sending someone home to go pray more or to go read a Bible verse or what have you. So the Secular Therapy Project was set up to ensure that the therapists that are in the directory that we connect you with are, number one, appropriately licensed in their state or their country. Number two, make sure that they maintain a secular practice, which means that you won't have to run the risk of being proselytized to. And number three, to make sure that they're running evidence-based treatments as well. All right, Amaia, what else do you want to talk about?
So I just want to briefly mention that we also have a private helpline community, and this is basically an online platform in which you can meet and chat with people who share similar backgrounds as you. And we have all sorts of different groups such as LGBTQ+, exclusively for families, for females. I think we have an Australian one. So all sorts of different groups. I'm sure you will find yours there. And apart from the chats, they also hold Sunday night Zoom meetings, because I've seen in the chat that someone was asking about Sunday evenings. This is the private helpline community, not the helpline as it is. So yeah, if you want to join any of these groups, all you have to do is speak to one of our helpline agents, and they will guide you through all the steps that you need to follow. So it should be easy enough. And before we jumped into speaking about last week's RfRx, I do want to speak about volunteering. So volunteering in RfR has also provided a lot of healing to all of us, really. It's such a great thing to do if you have some extra time in your day. And it's just a great way of making sure that you're just doing something for other people. It's a great feeling. And we're always looking for volunteers. So if this is something that you would be interested in doing, all you have to do is go to our volunteering page. And we have all sorts of different roles. So I'm sure that we will find something for you. And the website will guide you through all the things that you need to do and all the information that you need to provide, so it should be easy enough. So now let's talk about last week's RfRx. So last week we have Daniela Sousa, who of course has been here before, and she is amazing. And she was speaking about hope in a godless world. And I feel like this was a really, really relevant topic, because living in a pandemic, in a global pandemic, is quite easy to lose hope and to feel a bit down and not see how the future can be better. So I feel like she really offered an amazing insights on how to, in your everyday life, make sure that you think hopefully, and as she says, make the decision of being hopeful. So what do you think, Eric? What do you get out of the talk?
Yeah, last week's was really, really powerful for me, because I get so frustrated when I'm in conversations with folks, and religious folks specifically, and the conversation sort of ends at, well, you just have to have faith. So faith kind of had a sour taste in my mouth, just that word did. And what Danielle did last week is totally turn that around for me, where we can take more ownership of that word, and distinguish it from trust, like normally it is confused with. And the really cool thing that she also said is she gave a quote from Elizabeth Gilbert that said, she said, "Turn your face stubbornly towards the light and keep it there." And that's in a reference to choosing to have hope and continuing to move forward and working towards the goal. It's just a really, really fantastic, and I got hope out of the end of it too. It was heartwarming and fun too. Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about for last week's?
Well, I guess I can say that a personal friend of mine did send me a message saying that she really needed to hear that, and that kind of made the whole effort just worth, because obviously making the RfRx sessions takes a lot of time and effort. So that comment just made my day. And I'm going to send it to Danielle when I invite her for the next one, of course. And it was just so lovely to hear that. It was just, it makes all the effort worthwhile.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's what I can say. It was just amazing.
So this is how our meeting is going to go, just like every other week. We're going to have a discussion with our guest for about an hour. And then during that discussion, you may have some questions. So please type those questions into the chat. And during the second part of our discussion, we will have a Q&A session where we'll take those questions and ask Mr. Becker. And then after that, we're going to have a fantastic message from our Executive Director, Gayle Jordan. Very exciting. And then we're going to shut the recording off and just hang out for a little bit. And this is one of the most popular parts, and it lasts for hours afterwards. It's kind of cool. So that's how it's going to go today. Amaia, would you like to introduce our guest?
Definitely. So this week we have J.R. Becker, and he holds a BA in philosophy and a Juris Doctor from Emory University's School of Law. After becoming a father, he was inspired to author the Annabelle and Aiden children book series. The first book on evolution was bound by Christian World News, which I think is an amazing accomplishment, by the way. Congratulations, that's so epic. And then he went on to become a #1 bestseller on Amazon, as it should. Since it launched in late 2016, the 6-book series has won various awards, raised $70,000 on Kickstarter, and has sold over 2,000 copies. Joseph lives in New Jersey with his wife Leah and 2 children, Annabelle and Aiden. So, hello, welcome back. Not back, sorry, all habits. Welcome to RfRx. How are you feeling today?
I'm really excited to be here. I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm doing well.
You know, I gotta tell you, JR, that I stumbled across your Kickstarter for the book about death and that you had for Annabelle Aiden. I stumbled across that Kickstarter at the perfect time for me, because it's something that I've been struggling with for a long, long time. And when I saw what you were doing and I got it, I'm like, I need to back this project. And when you were done with it and the books went out and I received 4 copies for myself to give around. It just, I have one for me. I have one for me too. And I'm not ashamed to read, to say that I read a children's book, but it really, really helped. It really simplified things, and it was just beautiful work. Thank you so much for doing this.
That means a lot. Thank you. It's funny because I didn't even, it wasn't even my idea to write that. I'm very interactive with the secular homeschool community, and a lot of them were asking me to write that book. And then I said, I have to really, I can't write it until it really clicks and I think of how I'm going to write it and how the story is. And then I said to them, I do not want to call it What Happens When We Die. I can't call it that because the D word is very heavy for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's, no one's going to want to buy it. And a lot of moms and dads and specialists and experts and therapists told me I have to just say it the way it is. They said, don't beat around the bush. I wanted to call it What Happens When We Go.
Oh,
and a
it
lot
almost sounds like a Dr. Seuss type of title, though.
Yeah. And I thought, it'll be about death, and I could have, through the pictures they'll see. And, childhood education specialists told me that will confuse children. So, while I'm proud of the book, and by the way, this is our most popular book. I think it's the most important book in our series. It's the most popular book by far. It made the most impact, but I'm really grateful of all the people that helped guide me and inspired me and told me ways that really helped it come to fruition. So yeah, but thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed that and it was meaningful.
Yeah, I'm over 40 years old, and I got a ton out of this children's book. Not ashamed to admit it, but
No,
maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I'll say, I think it was right after the Kickstarter, someone wrote to me that his mother was very ill and he wanted a copy. First of all, he got a picture of her face in the book because, as you know,
wow.
one of our Kickstarter rewards, we try to get our readers to send in pictures of their faces, of them or their loved ones or their children, and we put them in the book because we want to be a part of a community. So he put his mother in the book. Unfortunately, his mother passed away right before he got the book, but he sent me a video of him reading the book at his mother's funeral and memorial, and that was very emotional that I was a part of that. This is just what the cover looks like for people.
So what's your origin story? I mean, were you ever religious? Were you ever indoctrinated into some sort of belief system at all? Like, what I would imagine that we're eventually going to get into how this book this book series kind of formulated, but tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. So I grew up, my parents, as they got married and started to have children, they decided to become religious. I was raised in a Orthodox Jewish home. I had a good childhood, mostly. It was a loving household. Things were fine. As I got older, things were not so fine. I started to question a lot of beliefs. My wife makes fun of me that I'm a black and white person, but when it comes to certain things, I look at them as, they're true or they're not true, and I just want to know. And I think when someone really enjoys their religion and the ritual and the practice, they tend to question less. I really didn't enjoy a lot of it, and I wanted to, my attitude was, if I have to do this, then I have to do it, but I want to know, what do I have to do and what do I not have to do? Mm-hmm. Judaism is full of rules, 24 hours, for 25 hours every weekend. You can't flick a light switch. You can't use electricity. You can't drive. Anytime you ever eat meat, you have to wait 6 hours before you eat any dairy. Kosher, Sabbath. I mean, you can't wear woolen linen. And then there were so many things that I thought there's no textual basis for this, head coverings and
you couldn't have dairy after meat? It's like
Correct. All Orthodox Jews, part of kosher is you can't have meat and milk together.
So you
Do they explain why? Like, is there a reason why they, or is it just like, this is the rule, you know, suck it up and do it?
So for some things, they do explain the reason, and for other, I love that we're jumping into this. For some things, they explain the reason, and for other things, they do not, and kosher is one of the things they do not.
So you couldn't have a cheeseburger?
You can't have a cheeseburger, and not only that, even if the burger's kosher and the cheese is kosher, you still can't have it because you can't have meat and milk together. And then, you know, then it's like, well, if you take a bite of meat and then a bite of dairy, you know, how long do you have to wait in between? So it depends what your tradition is, depending on where your grandparents and their parents are from, what country they're from. So some people wait 3 hours, some people wait 6 hours. But it was just extremely rule oriented, and it made me question, like, is there a God, but is there a God who cares how many hours I wait between meat and milk? And why does he care when children all over the world are dying and all this? I mean, I just had a lot of questions. And I remember one of my earliest memories was I was with my brother. I would go to synagogue and people would pray, and they would close, you know, grown men and grown women would close their eyes and sway back and forth. And I always thought, like, do they really, really think that they're talking to someone, that they're being heard? And I was a kid, and I thought, you know, when I get older, I'll understand. I guess I'll understand, because I must be, you know, why does it seem so crazy to me, but it doesn't seem crazy to anybody else? And I remember talking to my brother. He reminded me, and he said to me that I told him, like, he asked me if I believe, and I said, yeah, I believe. I guess I'm supposed to believe. I believe. But then, you know, we asked each other, like, do you really, really believe? And I just always had those doubts. And kind of cutting to the chase, many years later, you know, I spent many years, I found my way. I avoided the things I didn't like. I you know, leaned towards the things I did like. I had my outlets. But when I was older, and I was after college, after law school, I was living on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and there was a rabbi named Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman, and he gave a speech called Rational Proofs for Judaism. And it completely blew my mind. Not so much what he said, but the fact, I didn't even know that conversation really existed out in the open. I kept waiting for, like, lightning to strike us all for even talking about it, and that didn't happen. But I spoke to him afterwards, and he said he debates atheists online. So, you know, I'll just cut the story short, because I'm sure this is a common story with many people, but I spent the next 4 to 6 years kind of obsessing about, you know, this question, the God question. And I watched every YouTube debate, and I bought all the books by every rabbi and pastor and atheist and priest. And I read all the arguments, and in a very analytical way, I just went, I kept hammering away, and I was just like, wow. And I came to my conclusions, and I was kind of left with I was kind of amazed, but I was also left with a huge emptiness. Like, what now? How does it all work? If, you know, I knew that science stuff worked in some way, but in the end, I always had believed that God did it. And when you believe that God did everything, the way in which he did it becomes a lot less interesting. And as soon as that dissolves, the way everything actually works becomes a lot more interesting.
Right.
And I was very excited about how it all works. Why do I have 2 eyes? How did this happen? Why don't I have 4? Why don't I have 8 fingers on each hand? Why are trees green? You know, how does this all work? Why is it that, you know, mountain climbers who live in the mountains in Nepal could breathe thinner air than I can? How does that work? So I learned all I could, and I was so inspired by it. And my friends and family were like, we don't want to hear anything more about it. And I don't blame them. I feel bad for them. So I'm like, I needed an outlet. So children's books, for more reasons that I could get into later if you all want. But I thought children's books were a great idea. And I said, I'm going to write a children's book about evolution. And I did, and it was banned. And that kind of actually scared me. It was not pleasant at the beginning because I wasn't used to that kind of thing and that kind of attention. And then just the support I got, and the sales, and people were reading it and really sending me encouragement, made me want to write a second book. So I wrote a second book on critical thinking and mythology, and I mailed it to Christian News Network with a letter.
Can we back up? You said that your first book was
I'm going very
banned.
fast. Feel free to cut in anytime.
Okay, your first book was banned, and it was about evolution. Where was it banned? It wasn't banned in the U.S., was it?
So when I say banned, there was an article by the Christian News Network that said, do not read this book. This book was written by a group of aggressive atheists, which, by the way, yeah, so you could go to Google right now. Maybe Amaia could find the link and put it in the chat. But if you put into Google, Annabelle Aiden, aggressive atheists, you will probably find the article by the Christian News Network.
Oh,
and they don't know. First of all, there's no way. My atheism has nothing to do with evolution. I mean, you know, obviously so many religious people completely accept evolution. You know, second of all, I'm one person. I'm not a group of people. I mean, I don't even know how they just wrote this whole scathing article about this like group of aggressive atheists who came together to indoctrinate children with Darwinism. And with Darwinist propaganda, I think they wrote. So
your subtitle is Increasingly Aggressive Atheists Target Children in New Evolution Promoting Book. Lovely, I love it. It's amazing.
Yes, I'm promoting it. I'm promoting science and knowledge. So so I wrote a public response, and I sent them a second book called Oh, the Things We Believed, about critical thinking. And I was hoping they would ban that too, but I think they knew what I was up to and they ignored me.
So your second book was on critical thinking then. Your first book was evolution, and you wrote that by yourself, I would imagine, with some help from other folks?
So I wrote it by myself, and I like to think of things chronologically as a story. I was told not to write it because evolution is not a story. And I told that person or those people that it is a story. And it starts
absolutely it is, yeah.
Yeah. And it starts with the first living thing trying to make copies of itself, like we all do. And well, like some of us do. And and you know, genetic mutations, you know, DNA replicating accidents, natural selection, but I show how it goes from a single-celled bacteria, the first living things, to you know, to worms and fish and the Tiktaalik climbing up onto land, and amphibians and primates and humans, and that's it. And at the end, I try to end all of my books with a moral lesson, because I think moral lessons are great, but when we could reap them from things that are actually true, that are from concrete facts in the natural world, that's even better. So I end by telling children that we are all literally related. You don't need a metaphor for this. We are actually literally related by blood. Every single human being from every single country, of every single race, we are all made of the same stardust, and we are all made of the same stuff, and we all evolve from the same common ancestor, and we all have to be kind to each other, because we share the world together. And that's it. You know, that's that first book. So.
And how did you manage? Because obviously your background is in law, and writing a children's book about evolution, and more interestingly, I think death, which is something that I don't think any other author has touched for children. How did you approach it? Like, that must have been so, you know, such a new thing to do. How did you do it?
So even though I'm not the illustrator, I hired an illustrator named Max Rambaldi, who I'm extremely grateful to, and who really turned my written word into magic. I've always been a writer. I majored in philosophy, and I've always grappled with these big questions. And I've always been good at breaking complex phenomena down to the bare bare necessities to teach to children. I really enjoyed doing that. I was a drum teacher for about 10 years. When we were little kids, I used to set up video game lessons to teach my brother how to teach video games. I started writing but never published a paper on all the arguments about God, and I haven't ever published it, but I've always been writing. And I actually self-published a novel. It's on Amazon now. It's called The Spider and the Ant. When I was in law school, I wrote this novel and I self-published it. And I'm extremely proud of it, and I think it's wonderful, but I feel like it's one of those things that's like, it's my work and it's super weird, and most people that read it don't enjoy it. So I urge everyone to not purchase it. But, there's one guy out there who left some review and he like raves about it. And I'm like, you totally understood what I was trying to do. And I don't know who he is, but it's kind of like a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy type of book, but it's like a 900-page fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, with nations and wars and gods. And each character satirizes a different philosopher. And yeah, one of the nations is like Plato's Republic, and they go to war with a nation that like worships Aristotle, but his name is backwards, El Tatsura. And it's a whole, the main character is after Rene Descartes. But anyway, so I had that background, and then I realized children's books, even though they definitely require a unique set of skills, they are a lot easier in terms of quantity of time. And, you know, people buy children's books. People don't buy 900-page novels by people they never heard of before, but people will buy children's books. So that's how I got into it. And that's how I was able to do it. I had done all the research for how to publish on my novel years earlier.
So you have 5 Annabelle and Aiden books in the series currently, right? Evolution, Critical Thinking, Death. The other 2 are escaping me. What are the other 2?
So there's actually 6. So
6.
The first one is Evolution. The second one is Critical Thinking and Myths. The third one is The Big Bang and how we're all made of stardust.
Yes.
It's called Worlds Within Us. The fourth one is Death, and then the fifth one is Sapiens on human evolution. And then the sixth one just came out. It's called This World Was Made for Me. And it's on evolution, but it's also told through mass extinctions. So it goes right. It's wonderful for happy children. But it basically teaches us that this world, it's an environmental book as well. And it teaches us this world was not made for us, but this world does not belong to us, but we belong to it, and we have to treat it well. And we kind of look at all the mass extinctions, and before each mass extinction, whichever species is kind of dominating Earth at that time, whether it's dinosaurs or bacteria, they kind of think the world was made for them.
Oh,
wow. This world was made for me. And then all of them, die, except for one of them, because that one just happens to have some random genetic mutation. And then that one kind of repopulates the Earth and forgets what happened in the past, and then says, this world was made for me, and on, until it gets to humans and climate change. And, towards the middle of the book, you kind of see Aiden standing on top of a pile of all the extinct species,
Wow.
and
That's
he's
amazing.
on top, arrogantly saying, this world was made for me. And then Annabelle's like, I think it's getting warmer. And then at the end they learn, we are part of the world. We have to be careful. We have to treat it kindly, and it'll be kind to us. And it ends with a beautiful message, but it also does teach some humility to man. So
it's a kind of a cautionary tale, lessons, all right, through repetition. Nice.
I'm so happy you just said that, because the back cover says a playful cautionary tale. Yeah.
Do you have another book that you're in the works on, number 7?
I have 4 or 5 ideas in my head, but I have 2 ideas that I want to do next, and I'm waiting for the aha moment for it all to come together. The 2 ideas are aliens and gods. So I want to make a book about the golden record, which a surprisingly huge amount of people don't know about. That we sent a is it the Voyager
Yeah,
or the
Voyager 1 and 2.
there you go. We sent that to space with a golden record and a record player with sounds from the Earth. So if aliens find it, they know where we are. There's a map. I think there's pictures of humans, right? So I want to make I'm thinking of a book called The Golden Record and about aliens and the search for extraterrestrial life, the Drake equation, the Fermi paradox. I don't know how familiar the listeners are with those, but I would explore those. And then maybe a book called The Book of Gods or The Small Book of Big Gods and talk about a history of belief.
The Small Book of Big Gods. That's awesome.
You like? I think you're actually the first person I'm telling you that to.
Oh.
Okay.
Exclusive in RfR.
Okay, that's better than the Book of Gods. I'll have to write that down. Okay.
So it seems like you're. Go ahead.
Well, no, I just realized maybe I should call it the Big Book of Small Gods. We'll have to talk about that.
I think that yeah, we've got a few folks in the chat that are kind of giving some ideas too.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like the curiosity that was sort of sparked by this the rabbi that you heard talk a long time ago really kind of set you down on this path of learning more about the world. And you have children yourself, I would imagine?
Yes.
And how do you keep that curiosity alive? Like the curiosity you have in yourself, how do you keep it alive in your children?
Right. So I'm in a very interesting situation because I live in a religious community. My spouse is religious and I'm a complete atheist. So it's a fine line and I'm learning more every day, but the most important thing to me is to maintain a level of objectivity in children. If I was extremely religious, I would want the same thing. And it's something that my wife agrees with. And basically, to get to the bottom line, I think it's absolutely essential to tell children right away, no matter what you believe or not believe, children need to know that there are different people in the world that believe different things. And that is something that a lot of people that are dogmatic in their religiosity or their atheism or whatever, they really try to shield their children from. They want their children to grow up in what they would call a safe, not confusing place. Basically, they don't want their children to be confused too much or thinking too much, depending on how you say it. But I really tell my children, like, some people believe this and some people believe this, and you should go talk to them about it. You shouldn't only talk to me. This is what I think, but you should totally talk to Uncle Ben because he has a totally different picture. And the more children are what some people might call confused, the more they're going to learn, because life is confusing. And I mean, sure, they could live like an artificial plastic life where they're never confused and they have this perfectly neat, sanitized, bottle of beliefs I wouldn't even call them beliefs, just kind of like things they're parroting. But yeah, I think to keep kids curious and make sure that when they're older, their belief system is standing on a house that they themselves built. I think it's important for them to be exposed to as many viewpoints as possible in a gentle and in a safe way. Yeah.
You're basically describing exactly my childhood. I was raised in a very sheltered environment and full of Christians, and maybe ran across a few Mormons, but everybody else seemed weird. Jehovah's Witnesses seemed weird. Christian Scientists seemed weird as a kid to me. And I never had heard about Buddhists or Hindus or even Islam or Muslims when I was a kid. And it took me going into college and taking a world religions class and it really shocked me as like how many other different religions are out there. And it was something I got in my late teens and early 20s that I wish I had access to much earlier.
Right. And then another thing I would say is try to, I don't know if anyone here heard of Dale McGowan, but he writes books about how to keep children curious as well. And he says something in one of his podcasts that was, he says it in a tongue-in-cheek way, but he says lie to your children. And what he means by that is not actually lie to your children, but kind of say lies that are so ridiculous, kind of poke fun at them and joke with them. I'm trying to think. Okay, so just a few nights ago, my daughter lost a tooth a week ago, and I finally got some cash, and she really wanted the tooth fairy, and I put it under her pillow. And the next day she said, it was you, it was mommy. And I said, it wasn't me and it wasn't mommy. And we're dog sitting this dog Milo. I said, maybe it was the dog, maybe it was the tooth fairy, and she started, Daddy, are you lying? And I'm like, think about it. What, try to say things that are kind of comical lies that would cause them to think and in a fun way. And I think like Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, maybe I'm ruining a poll question, but my opinion is that these are huge opportunities to teach children critical thinking in a huge way through a back and forth dance.
It sounds like instead of telling the children how to think, instead of giving them fish, you're teaching them fishing in a sense. Because I can kind of see that my upbringing, I was told how to think, but the curiosity was something that they couldn't quench, and that ended up for me being the what really got me out of this. But it sounded like for you, you're trying to train them on how to think critically when it comes to these things. And so telling outlandish lies in some sense is a way to help them think critically. Is that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And at what age do you start doing that? Because I would assume that if they're like 2 and the family wants to celebrate Santa Claus, you're not going to be like, well, what do you think about blah? So at what age do you introduce them to these questions?
Right. My kids are 6 and 8, and I think it's that's the perfect time. Maybe when they turn 4 to 5. Mm-hmm. But definitely even when they're 4, they should be told that there are people in the world that believe different things. A lot of people would agree with me. I think they would say that's too confusing for a child to handle. I don't think that's too confusing for a child to handle. I think if you really dig deep and talk about certain things, that could be too confusing. Like, he's sure that God exists, but she knows that he doesn't, and this is a huge deal. Like that's not good. But just basically, like, there are different kinds of people in the world. They pray to different gods. They believe in different things. Some people don't believe in any gods. Through history, people believed in. Just to. They shouldn't be fed one worldview. That, I think, is poison.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've got from RfR is listening to all of these stories of people who didn't learn about evolution until they were like 20, and to me that is like mind-blowing, because I've been raised in an atheist household. They never spoke about God. I heard the word God for the first time when I was like 5 or like 7 or something. I was like, what's that? Like, I didn't understand. So when I heard that, when I've been hearing all of these stories of so many people who have been so isolated from the world, it's just incredible that, like, they're so, as you say, parents trying to not confuse them, but they're actually just kind of overprotecting them of reality, kind of, because evolution is obviously a fact, not just a story. So yeah, I think it's great that you're writing all of these books and helping parents in that, because I have no idea of how I'm going to teach my kids about death. Evolution seems a bit more manageable, but other topics such as death or aliens and things like that, it's
right.
Yeah,
right. And my books do leave room for religious faith. They really do. I take great efforts to make my books pro-science and not anti anything. I mean, I guess anti-ignorance, but not, in my books, Tardigrade Tom comes along, or the Skeptosaurus dinosaur, and he kind of says, we don't know if there's an afterlife. He doesn't say there is no afterlife. He says we don't know. We don't know certain things. But then he says, here's what we do know. So I kind of take the approach of like, there are things we don't know. There are things we might know one day, we might not. But what we do know, reality is good enough. Reality is so much more beautiful and amazing and something to celebrate than, any myth or fairy tale. And that's the main philosophy behind my books. I really try to, I think there's a lot of religious people out there that are philosophical pragmatics. They're just like, a lot of them admit, like, I don't know if there's evidence for God or for religion or this or that, but it gives me comfort. And I get how the ritual and the culture could give comfort, but when it comes to certain core beliefs, especially as they started to impinge on scientific beliefs, I think there's a misconception out there that reality is tragic and no way to live, and all there is meaninglessness and mortality, and we should just give up, and we need something magical to rescue us from ourselves. And climate change is scary, and death is scary, and taking care of the planet is hard work, and these things are all scary, and it's so much easier to just kind of feel like there's a big brother or a big alpha who will take care of us and everything will be okay. I think coronavirus kind of woke a lot of people up, like the world is a little more fragile than we maybe thought, and we have to come together and figure this out ourselves. So
I hear a lot about folks complaining about kids these days, and that they're only playing video games or watching TV in front of the screen all the time. And how would you kind of, if you were a parent to some of those kids, how would you kind of work to deal with that? Is that a good thing in your opinion? Is that a bad thing in your opinion? And what would you do if something needed to be adjusted?
So when you say, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What is the word that referring to exactly?
I'm sorry. Too much screen time, too many video games, too much TV.
Oh, so I'm not really qualified, I mean, in that area, but I think it depends on the kid. I think for a large portion of children, that's a bad thing. Kids should be out and playing and being part of the real world. Honestly, for a large portion, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it depends on the personality of the child. The child might have certain needs or certain emotional ways that they relate through technology that I think it depends on every situation. I think every situation is different. And I think if it's, everyone has a part of life where, for 2 years in college, I was a big party animal, or I was, in middle school, I stayed up till 2 a.m. playing video games. But then I one day after a year and a half, or, I pulled myself out of it, and, they learn from it, and it I think in a way it almost enriches who they are, because they went through that, and they learned how to enjoy that. It was a big part of their life. They got over it, and they pulled themselves out of it. I think if someone's doing that for, if it's getting destructive and they're killing, the schoolwork is suffering and it's going on for years, then it's a big issue. But that's something I would tell everyone to, like, I am not qualified to speak on that in a professional way. And I would, every child is different, and they should definitely, like, consult someone who could talk to that situation.
You also mentioned, like, we were talking a little bit about how to get kids to think critically when it comes to different belief systems, whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or even the lack of a belief in any religion. What are some of the things that you would do to help kids think, explore the world around them, more in the science realm and less in the philosophy or religion realm?
Okay, so less in the so in the science realm,
Hmm?
for young children, honestly, get the hell out of the way. Children are born scientists, they're born explorers. And I know, I'm guilty of it when my son starts, when I'm making bread and he's mushing the flour and stretching it and throwing it across the kitchen, I get upset at him and I tell him stop. And he's like, I want to see what'll happen if I mush it on the wall. And I'm like, don't, just don't touch anything, just stop. And like, I'm guilty of that, so you should not do what I do sometimes. I mean, I think we're all guilty of that. But, number one, get out of the way, let them explore.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. As a kid, if there was a switch, I'd have to flick it to see what happened. If there was a plug, I'd have to unplug it and see what happened. And then the fire department would show up because an alarm went off. If there was like a dead appliance, I had to take it apart. And, my parents thankfully let me do those kinds of things. And I learned a ton about how things are made and the world around me.
Yeah. Yesterday, I built a trellis, which I did not know what it was a week ago, but I'm sure I think everybody knows, but I didn't know for gardening. But I was putting the screws in and I said, to my son, Aiden, come here. And he helped me put them in. And Annabelle said, can I put one in? I said, of course you can. And so that was great. There's a little engineering, but try to get them engaged. Try to not get too upset at the messes and the destruction, because children are naturally born scientists and they want to touch and feel and run and jump, and they're learning through that. So that's number one. Second thing I would say is to model curiosity. I like to say to my kids, I wonder how far that star is. I wonder how hot it is. I want, just kind of don't even give knowledge. Don't even say answers. Just kind of wonder things out loud. And then they might come up with, answers that are either hilarious or actually pretty amazing and intuitive. And it doesn't matter if it's the right answer or not. And it doesn't matter if you know the right answer or not. Just having those discussions and saying, I wonder how this happens. I wonder why. I think that cultivates a lot of curiosity.
Mm-hmm. And how can you deal with either community members or like close family who are very religious, very fundamentalist, and they're trying to indoctrinate your kids whilst you're trying to do the opposite? How do you deal with that dichotomy?
So that's a very important question. It's kind of a narrow, broad question. I think it depends on every situation. Listen, everyone's situation is different, so it depends. But if you can't keep them away from certain people, or maybe you don't want to, maybe I'm not saying people should do that. There's sometimes it's worth the price. Sometimes a kid could hear some things they shouldn't hear so they could have a relationship with their grandparents or their cousins or whatever it is. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it's not. It's a case-by-case decision, and everyone has to do what's best for them. But the best thing, there's two things I want to say. Number one is, and this was something I had to swallow, and it made me feel a lot better. I think kids being proselytized to is actually a good thing in certain situations. And I'm talking about a situation where you could go home and you could tell them, well, that's what they believe, but it's really important. Let me take you to Aunt Carol, because you should hear what she has to say. If a kid is never proselytized to in their life, and then they're proselytized to when they're 16 or 18 for the first time, heavily, they're going to be like, wow, I never heard any of this stuff before. So I'm thinking of a vaccine where you basically give someone a tiny portion a virus, or and then they're a little bit more immune to it.
Like a God virus?
What?
Like a God virus?
Yeah. I don't want to,
That's the title of Dr. Daryl Ray's book. So I was just.
Oh, okay. All right. So maybe, but yeah, I think that to answer your question, Amaia, I think I had a hard time here, just sitting there and listening to people tell my kids certain things. But then I'm like, you know what? I heard this stuff. I grew up only hearing this stuff. And, through hearing other stuff by other people, I was able to really take it all in and think about it and turn it over in my head. So I think to answer your question, sometimes, people could decide to cut off relationships, but if they don't, sometimes it's not such a bad thing, as long as you kind of set against that. Do you know what I mean? Once you go home, once you're out of that situation, it might be not best to start a whole debate then, but, on another day, make absolutely sure that your kids know that, like, what that person said, you don't agree with, and a lot of other people don't agree with, and a lot of other people do agree with. And I think that's a great way to let the child put it into its place and not consider those words as strong as they otherwise would have.
So it sounds like.
Oh, sorry, Eric, go on.
It sounds like allow them to be proselytized to, but make sure that you can, quote unquote, debrief them afterwards and have a conversation about it afterwards. What did they get out of it? Was there, how does this compare to what Uncle or what Aunt Carol said, type of thing? Okay.
Yeah, pluralism is everything.
Got it.
And that's why a lot of people hate pluralism. And they, I'll tell you, Orthodox women cover their hair most of the time. My mother stopped covering her hair a few years ago. And my sister said to me, I'm talking years ago, my sister said to me, I don't know what to do. Like, if she comes over, my kids are going to be so confused. I don't want to tell her not to come over, but like, if she comes over, in pants or with her hair uncovered, my kids are going to be so confused. What should I do? And this might sound like a ridiculous question to you all or to certain people, but this is like a thing. Like, people don't want their kids to know that there are people that aren't exactly like them. So, I told my sister, I think it's great. I think you should tell them the truth. Tell them that people do different things. People believe different things. Some people believe the same thing, but they practice differently. And I think that's actually something you should tell them anyway, I think that's what I said to her, and I hope that's what I said to her. but
we know one way or the other.
Exactly. Pluralism is the most important shield or sword we have. To some people it's a shield, to some people it's a sword, and some people hate it and they don't want their kids to know about it.
And what are your thoughts about how we educate our children in morality and ethics? Because obviously it's not as straightforward, I guess, as science. If science is straightforward, which we could debate about that, but you know what I mean.
So I'm trying to decide whether to ask you to make that more specific. In what sense?
Yeah, so like, do you prefer to tell your children what is wrong and what is right, or let them discover it by themselves? And if so, and if you think they're going through a wrong way, or a way that you disagree with, how do you manage that? Because I feel like it's a bit different from, I don't know, just a random belief or I don't know, how to make something, I don't know, how to make like a scientific experiment or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think it is a very good thing to tell your children what is right and what is wrong, to your best ability, and also kind of tell them that we're always learning, and something that we thought was right one day might one day be wrong, and vice versa. And I think it's actually good, maybe when they're older, to teach them that one day we thought slavery was right, and one day, for actually thousands of years and many generations, we thought that certain people that didn't look like us or think like us were bad people. And I think science, I mean, I gave a whole talk to the Ethical Culture Society about the is-ought problem and David Hume's is-ought issue, and whether or not we could learn morality from science. And, you know, so that's a whole talk. I mean, you open a can of worms, which is great. But the bottom line is, I think it's a great thing to tell your kids what's right and wrong. I think it's also a great thing to tell your kids that we're always learning and we're always hopefully getting better as history progresses, and you know, and teach them that I think cross the is-ought line. Basically teach, I mean, this is what my books do. It teaches that because, you know, facts, we're made from the same stuff and we're all related. We're all together. We're all equal. The color of someone's skin is like a cow with white and black spots versus a brown cow. I mean, it's so genetically, I mean, it's nothing. It's like the color of our eyes. It's really, teach children science-based ethics and evidence-based morality. Absolutely. But let them know that it's not infallible and that we're always learning.
So it's almost like you're teaching them that the world is shades of gray and not necessarily black and white.
Yes, or that it's black and white in certain ways, but that changes. And yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to impose the black. Yeah, maybe. But kind of honestly teach morality like we teach science and we teach history. This is what we know, but we're always learning and we might be wrong about something, you know?
I like
and
that.
By the way, this is why we have debates about pro-life versus pro-choice and gun control. I mean, those are moral issues, and we're learning and we're thinking and we're looking at data and we're seeing what works and what doesn't. So
going a little bit back to getting kids in front of as many different types of religions as possible. It sounds kind of like a nice way to, if a kid sees and knows that all of these different people believe all sorts of different things, it'd be much harder for that kid to think that there is one true religion. If they're given an example of dozens or so, or one true belief system, it sounds like. Is that close to what you're saying?
Yes, and that if they one day decide that there is one true religion, which they are less inclined to do, but if they do, it at least would have been that conclusion, that house that they stand on, they would have built themselves.
Got it.
Which is, I think, very important, which I think is more important than the conclusion someone comes to. You know, no matter, it's more important that my children, whatever belief system they end up with, is their own, that they got through on their own volition, you know, as much as possible, than that they just like agree with me completely. You know, I don't care. I mean, that would be nice, I guess, but like, it's not them, it's me. That's them being little copies of me. That's not appealing. So yeah, it shields them against being a sheep, essentially.
And you mentioned before that your wife is religious. How do you navigate that?
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. This was RfRx. We really appreciate your time.
Go clip. So one way I got lucky is that she's so incredibly non-dogmatic, and for her, it's just she says it's like it's a personal thing. So you know, she does her thing, I do my thing. Listen, it's hard. Also, there is value in certain in some of the rituals that I see that I think are beautiful. I think it's very beautiful for a family to turn off their screens and come together and sit at a dinner table every Friday night and sing songs together and focus on each other. There are certain, you know, we have a sense of community, and there are certain things that are very nice. And then, my wife's like, do whatever the hell you want. I just don't want to see it, really. Like, it's hard, but it's doable. If two people really respect each other and they give each other a very long leash or no leash at all, but they just see it as like, we're both adults, this is a personal thing. This isn't, and my wife is extremely, like, I think even more so than she's interested in learning about other cultures and other religions and history. And I mean, she's a plural, there are different, as we all know, just like there are different kinds of skeptics, there are many different kinds of theists and religious people. And my wife leans far more liberal and pluralistic. So, she sees it as a personal thing, and that's all. So that helps. But it's playing itself out, and we're learning as we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I imagine, me with my partner, where we already have like small disagreements on how we want to raise our kids and many years in the future, or I don't know, disagreements on different things. But I guess it's not the same when it's like when you're just a couple, or when you have children that you have to, take care of and teach and kind of guide in life and whatnot. So that must be quite challenging. I'm very grateful that my partner isn't religious, because I feel like I would find it personally very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the props to you, because
yeah,
I wouldn't know how to deal.
I think you learn what the other person needs, and you make sure to give them what they need. And if you can't, you let them know, like, this is something I can't, you figure out through time and through pain. It's a painful process often, but I think you learn through time. And I think not just with religion, like it's with everything. There's always huge issues. And, you learn through time. I think anyone that's in a relationship here for years could attest. Through time, you learn where you could push and where you can't, and you all kind of work it out.
Now, we talked a lot about kind of keeping, our own children curious, and what would you kind of recommend, or how would you approach maybe like you have a nephew or a niece or someone else's children? Do you have any approach towards keeping them curious as well, or kind of maybe cultivating curiosity in those situations?
So that's a great question. My philosophy is, don't go after anyone, don't chase anyone. Kind of like, if you build it, they will come. And if they don't, if you build it, those that want to come will come. Those, be available. Those that seek you out will seek you out. The only problem with that is, I do wish that when I was a lot younger, someone was more aggressive and, brought things to me that I had to only seek out later in life. But, the opposite side of that is just everyone proselytizing to everyone. And I think, in a world with the internet, a lot of barriers are being broke down. I'm actually friends with a few folks over at Ideas Beyond Borders. I'm sorry, I'm having Borders. Yeah, Ideas Beyond Borders. And they're actually, they actually already translated my children's book on evolution into Arabic and made it available for free on the internet to the Arab world. So that's amazing. I think in today's day and age, it's getting easier and easier for people to seek out knowledge. So I think, don't go after anyone, just build, whether it's children's books or a website or a Facebook group, whatever it is, whatever you could do. If you are enthusiastic about something, start an organization, do what you can, get your knowledge out there, and those that, make it available.
Would you possibly use the I wonder type of trick with them too, as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And even if they give the wrong answer there, just kind of nod and say, I wonder, and just kind of keep that going, because that, I think, will shake their, if they feel like they've already gotten the answer to a question, like, how did life begin? Which we're not completely certain about at all. You know, if they think they know the answer to that question, for example, and they're so certain, just keep saying, oh, I wonder if that makes sense, you know? And, you know, at worst you did nothing, but at best you planted a seed.
Excellent.
And
Could
without
you please-
rocking the boat too much, so.
Sure. Could you please send us like the link for all the translations? Because we have audience from all over around the world, so if they can get a copy in their own language, that'd be amazing.
Absolutely, I have to email them. I don't know if it was actually published yet. They said they finished the translation. So, but when it gets published, which should be sometime real soon, within the next few weeks, I hope, I will definitely send you the link.
Oh,
Awesome.
thank you.
Amaia, do you have any other questions for?
Not on my side. Do you have anything else you want to add, or anything you want to say before we jump to the Q&A?
I think that's it. People could learn more about me and my project at AnnabelleAiden.com. I think Amaia put the link earlier in the chat, and Annabelle and Aiden spelled the most common way. So that's AnnabelleAnden.com. And it's been an honor to be here. And honestly, I'm excited for any questions and to hopefully hang out for a bit. So I will pass it on. This has been great.
Awesome.
Fantastic. That's amazing. So the first question we got, I feel like it's not a very long question, but someone is asking if you have heard of the Stardust series by a child author, Bailey Harris.
Yes, I have. I am very, I can't, can I say I'm friends with them if I never met them in person? In the digital
course you
age,
can.
right?
This is the 21st century. Of
Yeah.
course you can.
Totally.
Eric and I are friends,
have,
and I've never seen him in my life.
Yeah, so they are wonderful. Bailey is wonderful. We have supported each other's campaigns, and we have been in touch, and I'm very grateful for their support. They've been a big support of the Annabelle and Aiden series. And it's funny, we keep speaking at different conferences and appearing in different places, but we have yet to meet. They are in, I think they're in like Salt Lake City. And I'm in the New York area. So yeah, it's a great series, and I recommend everyone to check it out. Hopefully one day we'll meet.
Yeah. Okay, so someone else asks, at what age would you give your kids religious books like the Bible to read on their own? So something a bit more, thick.
Right. It's so funny for me to even think like that, because I was reading the Bible for 3 hours a day since I was, a young boy.
Well, that was the Bible without the New Testament, though, right?
Right.
That was the more exciting half.
The more exciting half. Lots of killing. Yeah, lots of war. Lots of genocide. It depends what you're giving it them for. I think it also depends, it completely depends why you're giving to them and how they're learning about it. If they're learning about comparative religion, then it's a wonderful idea. Maybe when they're 14 or 14 and up, 15 and up. And I think before that, you could give them portions of it to read. Before that, I don't think they're going to want to read this huge, thick book. So I think parts of it when they're young, and then when they're 13, 14, they could really start trying to chew on and absorb larger portions of it.
So the next question is there any topic that you think we shouldn't discuss with our children?
I'm the kind of person that would say no. Mm-hmm. But that's because I'm very creative and thinking of ways to phrase things. Okay. Yeah. So, we should never talk to young children about rape. Honestly, I don't think they should know it exists. But I think it's great to tell children that sometimes people do bad things. So you just kind of go up the ladder of obscurity. and you tell them sometimes people do things they don't want to do, and sometimes people are stronger than others and they force them to do things that they don't want to do. Like if I want your money and you don't want to give it to me, you know, some people do bad things like that. I think you could always move up the ladder of obscurity in a creative way. So my answer to that would be, I don't think there's anything that you shouldn't talk to children about. I think if something is true, then it's worth talking about, or it's at least not worth hiding. I like the quote. A lot of people, it's funny, a lot of secular people agree with and a lot of religious people disagree with the following quote: if something could be undone by the truth, then it deserves to be undone, period.
Yeah.
So do I think that's always applicable? Almost always. So yeah, I lean towards talk to your kid about it if you could do so in a safe way. If you don't think you can, then don't, then hold off. But I think people could be more creative about things than they think they can.
All right, and we have one last question. So what happens, or what advice would you give if a parent has already indoctrinated their kid and then they've deconverted? Besides encouraging them to ask questions, would you have any other advice?
So if they already indoctrinated their kids into what? What?
Into a religious belief system.
Okay. And then the children deconverted?
No, and then let's say I've got kids,
Yeah.
and I've raised them from age 0 to 10 in a Christian Baptist household, and then I turn 40 and I have a midlife crisis and leave my religion, but my kids are still indoctrinated. Where do I go from there?
Oh gosh.
And I'm a little concerned about outing myself too.
Right.
Seems like asking questions might start that process the best.
Right. Well, is the person asking because they want to do that and they're wondering how, or they're wondering if they should even do that in the first place?
If they
More of a how.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a few questions here. How should they come out themselves? If so, how? Number one. Number two, should they even pass that on to their children and share it with them and try to teach their children? So there's a few questions here. So, you know, I'll try to, I'm scurrying about where to start, but just quickly what I did, I never had a coming out really. I mean, I did with my father, who's extremely faithful and religious to God. You know, I came out to him because I wanted to pull the Band-Aid off. But there's something I call coming out without coming out. And that's basically just kind of changing the way you dress, changing the way you talk, changing the way you live a little bit to be closer approximation to your belief system. And people see it. People aren't stupid. You know, so I think sometimes it's a good idea to rip the Band-Aid off, but sometimes if you feel like you know, your children are a certain way and you're a certain age, if this is the person's question and they don't know whether to come out or how, you don't always need to have a coming out Facebook post or a coming out announcement. Sometimes you could just change and people aren't stupid, and I don't think they look down on people because they know that people change and people grow. There's a beautiful comic of two caterpillars coming together, but one of them for a reunion, but one of them has these beautiful butterfly wings. So the caterpillar says, "You've changed," and the butterfly says, "We're supposed to." And I think it's okay to, like, you don't need to coming out. You could just kind of, and then if they question, you know, "Oh, why are you doing that?" You could be like, "You know, I just never saw the point in that. It doesn't really make sense to me anymore." And that could start the conversation. And that's a good thing because you didn't start the conversation. They did. So you're not the proselytizing person. You're just living your own life and you're doing your thing. And if they, you know, you're almost kind of inviting them if they want to question you. And then, you know, you kind of won because everybody wins. but you were able to, they wanted to start the conversation, you didn't start it, and that way you could have the conversation and talk, you know. In terms of deconverting them,
I think it was more a question of how do I go about parenting the kids, or keeping these kids more curious, or starting to ask, think critically, even though I've indoctrinated them for the first 10 years of their life. And now I no longer believe what I taught them. How do I go about undoing that,
I have a
perhaps?
friend who grew up extremely sheltered and religious, and he has 3 kids, I think 3, and they just completely became secular, dropped it off. They moved apartments, they moved to a different community, and they explained it to their kids. I think it depends on the kid's age, but at whatever kid's age they're at, the answer should not be leave them alone. The answer should not be, well, they're already emotionally dependent on these beliefs, so they should never be exposed to the truth, or what I think is the truth. I think that's always the wrong answer. The only question is not if you should expose them to other things, it should be how. That's the only question. And the answer is slowly, but it depends on, you know, I can't answer that. It depends on the child. It depends on the age. It depends. But absolutely, it could start with, this, Bill Nye, the science guy, says this, what do you think about that? So it doesn't have to come from you. It could come from someone else. That's a lot less threatening. So you could show them a YouTube video. You could show them a book. I know Richard Dawkins wrote a book for young teenagers within the past few years. Just expose them to other stuff, and you could make it like not from you, but you can make it like from other people. And then you could say, I kind of like this video. I think it's kind of cool. I didn't know that that's how it all works,
Yeah. Well, JR, thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us today. This was fantastic. And as if I didn't get my point across at the beginning, I strongly encourage each one of you to check out JR's books. I am over 40 and I love them. And so I have my own copies. If I can do it, you can too.
Thank you, Eric.
Do you have a little time to hang out with us afterwards?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, that's going to wrap up this part of it. Amaia, would you like to tell everyone what's coming up next week?
Sure. So it has actually been touched upon a bit today, the topic of next week. So it's A Better Life in a World Without God with Chris Johnson. So Chris Johnson is a filmmaker and a photographer, and he's going to talk a bit about how can we deal with life now that we know or we believe that there is not a God. So how can we deal with our own mortality, for example? How do we live our lives? If this is the only life we have, what do we do with it? So all of these big questions that I'm sure we can all think about and relate to, because I think like everyone has had them at some point in our lives, and I feel like it's going to be such an amazing session. So I do encourage everyone to join us next week as they have done this week. So yeah, that's what's going to be next week. Eric, do you want to close the whole session thing?
So just as a reminder, we talked about this at the beginning. All of the previous RfRx recordings are on our YouTube channel, and this one will be up later this week as well. So go ahead and check out our YouTube channel. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. I want to get this goal before August is out to get 1,000 subscribers. It's like we're like 105 short. So if you haven't already subscribed to your YouTube channel, please do so. And if you have any questions, topical comments, inquiries, or suggestions, go ahead and email us at rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. You can also find our blog. We've got fantastic stories and discussions over on our blog at Excommunications, and our podcast. So we are about to let Gayle Jordan loose on whatever she wants to say, but like we do at the end of every RfRx, we're going to launch a feedback poll. This really helps us kind of schedule guests and see how we're doing. So if you could please answer that, we would appreciate it. All right, and now Gayle Jordan, our Executive Director. Welcome back. It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's good to be with you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. JR, what a wonderful presentation you made. It has made me think about, it's made me reflect on the parenting that I did. I was not the one who asked the question, but it certainly was relevant to me about having raised children in religion. And then my particular story is my children asked me questions that ended up with all of us coming out of religion. And so I guess my reflection on what you have offered is, to those of us who are parents and to those of us who are not, there are other children in our lives besides our own children. We can have a positive influence on other people's children without ever broaching the religious subject. I just recently had to say goodbye to some lifelong friends. I'm moving across the country. One of these friends has two school-age girls, and they're a religious family. And as we were saying goodbye, and as I was trying to talk to the children, and they were grieving, and I was sad, just simply talking about geography and the location and drawing them out and asking them, well, what do you think about that? When they said, oh, they were going to be so sad and we were going to miss one another. And I was asking them about, well, what should we do about that? What do you think we could do about that? What do you see as some options? And we talked about visiting, and we talked about doing Skype phone calls and FaceTiming. And when we treat a child with respect, when we ask them what they think, what their opinion is, and we truly listen to what they say, we are modeling 90% of the way there to developing their critical thinking skills when you empower them to do that. Anyway, it was what I was compelled to reflect on as you were giving your presentation, and I appreciate everything you said. Really, I'm supposed to be talking about RfR, but I just wanted to say what an impact your presentation had on me, and I look forward to reading the books and to getting the books. I'm excited about it. I had opened the window when you were talking about it, and I've been fascinated by both the artwork and by the topics in the book. So thank you again for being our guest. Everyone else, thank you for attending. You know that I give this RfR commercial every time we meet together. The guys at the beginning, our hosts, Amaia and Eric, have done a fabulous job of outlining what Recovering from Religion does. We're a vibrant, vital organization. You can see that. We stay awfully busy. We always are looking for more folks to volunteer to join us. We also are dependent upon the donations of people who share our passion and our vision for helping people. If that's something that you feel like you have in your life, we would always love that. Volunteering, donating. But let me also encourage you, if you don't feel like you're in a position to volunteer or to donate, you can absolutely positively help us get the word out in your own social media circles. A simple repost, a comment on someone's Twitter tweet that says, oh, I'm doubting my faith, or I've just come to this conclusion, posting our website, posting a little word of encouragement, reposting our social media where we talk about these RfRx, these Monday night RfRx, would be invaluable to us. We work off of a shoestring budget, and when you repost in your social media circles, that's advertising that we can't possibly begin to purchase. So I would encourage you to do that. And again, if you think you're ready for it, or if you're interested in it, volunteering and donating are also the backbone of Recovering from Religion. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and I look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Reach out today at recoveringfromreligion.org.